Alright guys, today is time for a pretty special video. This is one that I've been meaning to make for quite a while. Ever since I made the tutorial on how to make a basic inventory system, I always wanted to do a video on how to give our items uses, right? So you can pick up the items off the ground, but they don't currently do anything. Well, in this tutorial we're going to create a obelisk, and it requires these keystones to activate it. And as a wee bonus, I threw it in there so that when you activate the obelisk, it will give you a random amount of XP between 500 and 5,000. So that's just a little added bonus. So I added some XP in there, this little experience system. There is no leveling yet or anything like that, but I did add the option to gain XP. So if I hit play, basically, we run up to our little obelisk, and you need a keystone to activate the obelisk. So, if I run over here, pick up this keystone here, press E to pick up. Now I can interact with the obelisk, so press F to activate, press F, and it activates the obelisk and gives me 4,756 XP. And I cannot activate if I pick up another keystone and try to activate it while it's already going. Oh, hang on a sec. Let's activate it. I'll come back, try to activate it again. And I cannot do it because the obelisk is already active. So we have to wait the 10 seconds until it is no longer active, and then we can activate it again and get some more XP. So that's a very basic, I just wanted basically a use for our items. In this one, instead of doing a obelisk, I'm going to do a fire. So if you pick up a box of matches off the ground, then we will be able to light the fire. And you will need the box of matches to put the fire out and relight it and things like that. So yeah, but here I have an obelisk as an example. So let's get to it. I've already got this obelisk class. Let's add another one called fire. And this is essentially just going to be a fire pit that we can light and put out whenever we want. So it might take a little while to get this all done. I would expect this video to hopefully be around 20 minutes. I'm going to try to get it done quite fast, but there is some difficult things in this tutorial, so we'll try to breeze through it anyway. So we're going to open up our fire class that we just made. Remember, that is of type actor. Okay, let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is take care of the header file. Now, if you watched my last episode, C++ Basics, I explained what header files are for. So now we're going to declare a bunch of things that we will then use in our CPP. So the first thing we need is the trigger box, right? So U-shaped component. T. We'll just call it T-box. Very easy, very simple. U property. Edit anywhere. U static mesh component. This is going to be the mesh for the fire, so the logs or whatever we're using. As far as I know, I don't have any log models, but we'll just use some random object. So we're going to put SM underscore box. Or actually, this would be SM underscore fire, I guess. We'll put TB underscore fire, so trigger box underscore fire and SM underscore fire, so static mesh underscore fire. We're going to add the particle system because we want to make the fire have obviously a fire, and the particle systems will allow us to make a very nice looking fire. So U particle system component. PS for particle system underscore fire. We need our current player controller, and it's always annoying adding these. The editor tends to bug out when I try to add this, but we're just going to try add it anyway. Item system character.h. I am expecting something to go wrong with the editor here. Usually that happens. Yep, there we go. So if you guys get an error similar to this, all you need to do is just build It will take quite a while to build. Once it builds, just close and then reboot Visual Studio and it will fix that problem. So it's builded now, we just close that and then double click to open Fire back up. And when Fire is reloaded, it should be fine. So hopefully everything's all good now. Now that we've added our reference to item system character, which is our character, by the way guys, you will need your item system project. If you do not have that still, you're going to have to go back to the item system tutorial and complete that, because this basically carries over from where we were in that tutorial. So we're going to add a item system character, and we'll just call this current player controller. Now we're going to have some text that will appear when the player walks within the fire's range. And we'll call this help text. So help text equals ifstring text press F to activate the fire. Okay, very easy. We're going to have the int32 reset time. I will explain what this does. So basically, if we didn't have a reset time on the fire, we could just keep lighting it and unlighting it every millisecond, and that's just ridiculous. I want there to be a pause between when we're able to light and extinguish the fire. So if you light the fire, you have to wait maybe 1 or 2 seconds before you can put it out, right? The reason for this is also due to how we're going to implement this. We would run into a lot of problems if we didn't put a delay on it or a reset timer. So I'm going to make it so that there is a 3-second pause between when we're able to light the fire and then put it out. So you have to wait a little bit before you can put it out. We're going to add a couple of boolean values. So b player is within range equals false. So this is basically, is the player within range of being able to light the fire? And then b fire is lit equals false. By default, the fire is not going to be lit. The next thing we want to do is void get player, and this will take a parameter actor player. So by default, get current player controller is equal to nothing. We are using this get player function to initialize this value, and we did this in one of our previous tutorials. We're also going to make a function void light. So that's called when the player obviously lights the fire. Void advanced timer. This is used with this reset time here, and you'll see when we use that. And then void timer has finished. So when the timer counts down to 0, we will call this function. And then we need an if timer handle. And this will be timer, or we'll just call it countdown timer handle. And there we go. Now, the last thing I need is my trigger exit and trigger enter functions. So I'm just going to type these out manually. It will take a little while, but oh well. Void trigger enter class. So I'm going to use a forward definition here. Other actor. We're going to use a class u primitive component. If you do not understand what I am doing here, I urge you to go back to my previous tutorials where I explain what all this actually means. So go back to tutorial number 1 and just look at those and you'll be able to understand what I'm doing. And just to make your guys' life a little bit more convenient, I will put the code for these two functions in the description so you don't have to type that big mess out yourself. So there we go. And that's really, I think that's everything. Like that should be all we need to get the fire set up. So all of these components are going to work together to culminate into one big glorious fire class. So now let's go into the CPP and we can start actually playing around with these variables and methods that I've initialized here. So the first thing I'm going to do is come into my constructor and initialize the trigger box I made. So tb_fire equals create default subobject, and I'm creating a ubox component. And honestly, I'll just give this the text box. That's all it really needs. tb_fire generate overlap events is equal to true. Now we need to link our overlap events. So to do that, on component begin overlap dot add dynamic. Now this will not come up in IntelliSense. Very important. So just click off that, and then click back here. And then this a fire trigger enter, and then we can just copy this line, paste it in here, and change that to trigger exit, and change this to end overlap. The last thing I'm going to do is just set the scale of the trigger box. So we're going to say set relative scale 3D, and we'll just give that an F vector with the values 3.0, 3.0, and 1.0. And then we'll just make the fire our root component. So, whoops, root component equals tb_fire. Okay, so the next thing we want to initialize is our static mesh. So sm_fire, static mesh_fire equals create default subobject, use static mesh component, fire mesh, and then we'll just attach that to our root component, which is our trigger box. Okay, next thing to do is to initialize our particle system. So ps_fire equals create default subobject as usual, u particle system component, and we'll say fire particles. So we are now going to attach that to our root component. And by default, the fire is not lit, so we will disable our particle system for now. So set visibility equal to false. And that looks good. Also, we declared our reset time here. I'm just going to take that out and then initialize it down here in the constructor just to make things a little more clear. So reset time equals 3 seconds, or 3. Alright, slowly getting there. Never said this was going to be a quick task. But let's begin implementing some of these functions that I've declared. So the first thing I'm going to do is do our trigger enter and trigger exit functions, because these are always the easy ones. So when the player enters the trigger, we want to say B is within range equals true. Very easy. And then we want to say B is within range equals false when the player leaves the range of the fire. Also, when the player enters the trigger, we want to initialize our current player controller, and to do that we're using the getPlayer function that we made, and we're passing in other actor. So let's initialize our getPlayer function, void a fire getPlayer. And that is going to take actor player, so this is a reference to our player. And then we're going to set current player controller, which is this variable that we made in here. We're going to set that equal to our player, but notice we can't just, that doesn't work, right? Because player is of type actor. Since we know that it's going to be a type player controller, we can cast it. So to do that, I'm going to say cast, and then we're going to use the item system character, so we need to include that in our CPP as well. And then we say a item system character, like that. And then we need brackets around player. So what that's going to do is it's going to cast player into an item system character, because current player controller is an item system character. So that's all we're doing there. Very easy stuff. Now that we have a reference of our player, we can actually do something with it. In our tick function, the very first thing that we want to do is check if the player is equal to null. So to do that, getPlayer if current player controller is not equal to null. Very easy. If we didn't null check, so we'll put null check player controller. If we didn't null check this and it was equal to null and we tried to use it, the system would throw an exception. So that's why we're checking if it is null or not. The next thing that I'm going to do is add some things to the item system character. There's actually only a couple of things we need to do. If you come into the project settings and go into input, in action mappings I have added this interact action mapping and I've mapped it to F. Then what I did is I went into the item system character. I added these two functions, begin interact and end interact, and then I added bool b is interacting, and then in my CPP file I added these lines of code. So bind action interact, I pressed begin and I released end, and then I just implemented these two functions down here. So begin interact, b is interacting equals true, and end interact, b is interacting equals false. So just pause the video where you need to and copy those into your item system character class, and once you have that all set up, you are ready to continue on. So once you've got that in there, the next thing we can do is check our player controller. The first thing we're going to check is the current player controller interacting? So B is interacting. Also, we want to check if the player is within range of the fire. So, and B is within range. We also want to check that the player has matches. So to do that, we're going to say current player controller inventory dot contains matches. The last thing that we're going to check is the fire already lit? So if B is fire is lit. So if the fire is not lit, then we can go ahead and light it. So then we can just call the light function now. Alright, so if all these conditions are true, I know this is a lot of conditions here, But if all these are true, then we can finally light our fire. Let's implement our light function. So a fire light. I know this is a lot, guys, but it is necessary to get this fully implemented. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I want to give the player a small amount of XP for lighting the fire. Let's just make it something random again. So int 32 XP gained equals fmath random range, and we'll get a random amount of XP to give to the player, and we'll make it between 10 and 100 XP. Also, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into my item system character and just add int32 player XP. So the player will have a certain amount of XP, and we can go ahead and add to the player's XP. So we generate a random amount of XP to give to the player between 1 and 100. Oh, sorry, 10 and 100. Now let's give the player a nice little message. To do that, we're going to add the engine class. Game engine. Add on screen debug message. -1 5.f if color green, because why not? And then if string, we're going to use the printf function. You light the fire and gain %d XP. And then we're going to say XP gained. So however much player the XP gains, it's going to say you gained that amount of XP, basically. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is remove the matches from the player's inventory, because when you use a match, obviously we'll want to take it off the player. So current player controller, inventory, dot remove single. We only want to remove a single match, not all of the player's matches. Matches. Okay, and then we want to say the fire is now lit, so b fire is lit equals true. And then we want to turn the particles on for our fire, so ps underscore fire set visibility to true, and there we go. So that is our entire light function. There's actually not that much left to go, guys. Just a couple wee minor things left. So, let's see here. Okay. In our trigger enter, we're going to check if the player has matches, because if you don't have matches in your inventory, we don't want to say press F to light the fire. We want to say you need matches to light the fire, right? It wouldn't make sense. So what I'm going to do is add an if statement here. And we'll say if the current player controller's inventory contains matches, then we'll give them the option to light the fire. So G engine, I'll just copy this over. What was that? What did I call that? Help text. Okay. Help text. So. Okay. So when the player has the matches in their inventory and they are standing next to the fire, it's going to say press F to activate the fire. We're going to say that if the player does not have the items, the matches, then we will say you need matches to light this fire. And there we go. You need matches to light the fire. If the fire is already lit, we don't want to give the player the option at all. So let's check if the fire is lit or not inside of here. We'll say if B fire is lit. So if it is not lit, so we'll put an exclamation mark there. Then we can tell them the message. So if the fire is already lit, don't give them a message to light the fire, basically, is what we're saying. Very close to the end now. I just want to... What do we have to do now? I still feel like there's some more to do. The timer is really the only thing left. So, once we implement our timer, the entire system should hopefully be working. So, get world, timer manager, and the timer is very easy to implement, by the way, guys. Shouldn't take very long at all, maybe a couple minutes. Set timer, countdown, timer handle, this, a fire, advance timer, advance it every 1 second, true. And when we begin play, just as kind of a double check, I'm just gonna, when we begin play, I want to set the visibility to false as well. Okay, now we need to do our timer function. So this is the very last thing, and then the entire class has been finished. So void a fire, advance timer, and then void a fire timer has finished. So once we write these two functions, we're all ready to try out our class that we've made. So the advanced timer one is very, very easy. In this case, I'm just going to make it the fire goes out automatically after 10 seconds. You can make it a different way, but I'm just going to do it that way. Yeah, you know what, actually, let's not do it that way. Yeah, what the hell. We'll make it so the fire automatically goes out after 10 seconds, and then you need to get some more matches to relight the fire. So that should be good. So when we advance the timer, check if the fire is lit. So if B fire is lit, take 1 off the reset timer, and then check if the reset timer is less than 1. And if it is, call our timer has finished function. That is it for advanced timer, and now we just need to do our countdown has finished, or timer has finished rather. So ps underscore fire, set visibility to false, so basically just put the fire out. B obelisk, oh sorry, I'm thinking of my obelisk, B fire is lit rather. Equals false, and then reset our reset time back to 10. So I think that should be it. Let's go ahead and compile our project and pray to the Gaben Lords that we don't have a crash, because I swear to God that would absolutely suck. Please, please, Gaben. Please. I get the feeling this might be a long compile. We did type a lot of code, so... any day, any year. Yes! Yes! It has worked. It is actually compiled on the first try, which I swear to God never happens. But anyways, let's drag our fire in. Now the problem is we don't have a static mesh for our fire, so we don't have like some logs for our fire. So by default, I'm just going to make my fire a... we'll make it a bush, I guess. Kind of stupid, doesn't really make sense, but I don't really have anything else that I can use for it, so that's just going to have to be what we use, unfortunately. Oh well. So, now we need to add our particle system. I'm going to use the fire. And we'll make an item. So let's drag in an item called matches. So we'll make a new item. Item name is matches. And then our static mesh for our item will just be a little, we'll just make it a little box on the ground. Something that looks like a tiny wee box of matches, basically. So we'll drag that down, scale it. Okay. Might make it a little more thick. Okay, so we have a little box of matches on the ground. And it should work so that when I have matches in my inventory, I can light the fire, and when I don't have matches, I cannot light the fire. So let's play. We'll go over to our bush and try to light it on fire. You need matches to light the fire, so if I try pressing F, nothing happens, right? If I come back to the matches, I can pick them up. Press F to activate the fire, and I can now activate my fire. You light the fire and gain 36 XP. And then after, I believe I set the timer to 10 seconds, we should see the fire go out. Yep, it goes out. And now we cannot light the fire until we get more matches. The same thing basically works for the obelisk over here, which we can activate and get some XP from. So there we go. There is kind of a use for our items. In the other tutorial, you were able to create the items, but you couldn't really do anything with them. Well, on this one, we can actually use the items. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the tutorial. I have no idea how long I've been recording for, but I swear this probably wasn't the shortest tutorial. So thank you guys very much for hanging in there with me. Hopefully it was rewarding. Hopefully you really enjoyed the tutorial. I'm sorry I didn't add the XP to the player, but I can do that in another tutorial. That's not really a big deal. But anyways, guys, I will see you in the next tutorial. Thanks for watching.